Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Can say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
Mr. Armstrong, Park Central, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen.
Mr. Seibel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Seibel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have the tape.
That'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to... Why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Seibel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
I like it raw.
Raw. Ooh, baby, I like it raw.
Ooh, baby, I like it raw.
Neil Armstrong, welcome back.
Thank you. Always great to be back.
We've got some footage that I want to play to you that John F. Kennedy was speaking about the mission and about the vision. This was early in the 60s.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
The extraordinary time in the US at that time, you had the president of that ilk, you had politics, the administration, science, the community, all on song for this vision, all on song for that plan. What was that like?
Well, you have to appreciate the context. The Soviet Union had successfully put first a artificial satellite into space, and secondly put a man into orbit around the Earth. We were trailing. We had put only one flight, Alan Shepard, on a short 20-minute suborbital flight up to about 100 miles of altitude and back down into the ocean. Never had a person in orbit. And now the president was challenging us to go to the moon. The gap between 20 minutes, a 20-minute up and down flight, and going to the moon was something that was almost beyond belief, technically. But NASA was a new organization, only about 4 years old at that point, had done a lot of thinking about this. And they identified the lunar landing as perhaps the only way we could catch up with the Soviet Union. And as the president said, we were going to get in this game. He was saying, this is a new ocean around it. This is the new ocean, and we must sail upon it, and we must be a leader on it. And that caught people's imagination, because at that time we had the ideological competition between East and West, and concerns about the future of all humanity on Earth. So it was a very big thing, not just technically. It was sociologically a very big thing, and the challenge was enormous. So to be able to get the agreement of not only the government, but the will of the people to go along with that idea was quite striking.
Pardon my crude summaries, but someone sketching out all the Apollo missions in advance, saying, well, if we're going to get there, it's going to take this many missions. And you knew you were involved in the missions. You didn't know fundamentally at that point who was going to ever be the person to walk on the moon, if ever. And how fluid was that plan?
It was very very fluid. First, the first Apollo spacecraft was on a pre-flight test with the crew in the module atop the rocket on the pad at Kennedy Space Center. But then it was Cape Canaveral. The cockpit was pressurized to 1 atmosphere with pure oxygen, a little over. And a spark ignited some of the flammable material in the cockpit. The hatch was an inward opening hatch that the crew was unable to quickly open, and the crew was killed in the fire. It was a tragedy, and it was going to take us a long time to recover from that. We clearly had an unsafe spacecraft. We had to redesign it and rebuild it, and it was a 2-year delay. Now, there were only 4 years left to the end of the decade at that point, so we're losing half of the time in the race to the moon. But there was a benefit. Every advantage is accompanied by a disadvantage, and every disadvantage, every cloud has a silver lining. So we were looking for the silver lining. The silver lining we got was that we had 2 years to improve the spacecraft, not just the fire resistance, but a lot of other things in the system that really needed improving. So we could attack those and make a gigantic improvement in the quality of the spacecraft design and its construction. All the flights changed somewhat during the evolution of those flight periods. The second flight after the first flight was an 11-day flight to make sure that the command module had systems that would run for the length of a lunar mission. So they flew 11 days, and that worked well. And the next flight was going to have a command module and also a lunar landing module on it. But the lunar landing module was behind schedule, and it wasn't ready for a flight in 1968. So a very bold decision. They decided they would take the next flight on a third flight of the big Saturn rocket. The first two had been unmanned and not perfect, but a few problems that they worked out. Not only take the third one and fly it with Upins on it, but take it around the moon. An enormously bold decision. But that moved our program along a lot further, because now we knew we could prove that we could navigate to the moon, that we could communicate at lunar distance, and that that crew could take pictures of the potential landing sites and see what might be a good plan for future flights.
It's extraordinary to hear all this and to know how short a period of time this knowledge growth was taking place.
Oh, it was multiplying like mushrooms. Yeah.
I'm surprised you ever got to sleep. So what happened then? I mean, so how long before you knew that the likelihood, or the team knew the likelihood, that 11 was going to be the land and walk?
Well, I was the alternate or backup commander for the flight around the moon, Apollo 8.
Right.
And as soon as they took off, I was out of job, of course. And the boss called me in a few days later and said, "Would you take the third flight down the road, 11?" No, 8 was in the air, 9 was in the hangar yet; it hadn't started to fly, and 10 was the lunar module had not flown. There was no way we could predict what each of those flights would do. It was going to depend on the success and the accomplishments of each flight along the build-up period. But Apollo 8 worked well, 9 worked well, 10 did far better than expected, took a lunar module actually around the moon and tried out its propulsion systems and its navigation systems and communicating with 2 spacecraft simultaneously. All these things were accomplished in just those 4 flights. And so a month before the launch of Apollo 11, my cruise flight, we decided we were confident enough that we could try an attempt on a descent to the surface. And I should say that I thought we had a 90% chance of getting back safely to Earth on that flight, but only a 50-50 chance of making a successful landing on the first attempt. There's so many unknowns in that descending from lunar orbit down to the surface that had not been demonstrated yet by testing, and there was a big chance that we didn't understand something in there properly, and we had to abort and come back to Earth without landing. It's a risk-reward equation, and you're able to accept a level of risk so long as it's commensurate with the reward that you will get by achieving the goal that you're after. And that's kind of the balance you always make.
Did you ever allow yourself the luxury, and for the time I've known you, I suspect you're going to say no, but did you ever allow yourself the luxury somewhere between 8 and 11 of dreaming of the fact that you guys may be the team that actually does the deed?
No, I can't say that I did.
I told you
we were focused on progress and making those incremental steps, thousands of little incremental steps that got you closer.
Yes.
And we're looking for success in those steps and not focusing on that end goal too much.
So, there's the phone call. Neil, it's 11, you're the commander. Your reaction at that point?
Well, you know, I was asked by the bosses, do you think you and your guys are ready? Is there anything that you're really concerned about that you don't think we understand well enough that we can't go on? And so I was involved in those discussions. And I have to say, well, you know, it'd be nice to have another month. But we were in a race here, and there was some evidence that things were going on among our competitors, and we had to take the opportunity when we had it. And I had to say, no, we're ready. We are ready to go.
Let's go to some footage, because this of course is the launch where all of this emotional journey you took the world on.
Breakfast, medical examination, suiting up. Neil Armstrong, Commander Apollo 11. Edwin Buzz Aldrin, Lunar Module Pilot. Michael Collins, Command Module Pilot.
Starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises the third stage completely pressurized. Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. Hey, from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized.
what I saw in that footage was three, and perhaps I'm getting to an age where everyone looks young too, but I saw three young boys really who'd done so much work and who were taping up and getting ready for the adventure of their and the world's life. Can you recall any of your thoughts at that time as you were preparing? Was it all about the preparation? The emotions playing up?
It's a time of meditation and a time when you're focused on what you're really trying to do, but at the same time, there's a certain amount of relaxed atmosphere, and the reason is these rockets usually don't go off on time.
Neil, I was really excited up to this point.
So you're thinking, well, we'll get down to 2 minutes, and then they'll call a hold, and then they'll cancel the flight, and we'll go another day. So don't get too excited here about this one.
So there was a sort of a built-in, look, we're doing our best. It's likely not to happen, so we'll look the part and see what happens.
And you're always surprised when it actually lights and you go.
So tell me, in relation to the noise of all that's going on, particularly from ground to the next hit, what sort of noise are we talking about?
Oh, the noise at liftoff from the pad is extremely loud, and you get not only the noise of the engine, but the reflected noise that's coming up off the ground. And so consequently, until you fly out of that reflection after about 30 seconds, it's very difficult to hear anything, even with our special helmets and earphones and so on. But after you get out of the reflected sound, it gets pretty reasonable. A very shaky ride in that particular rocket, the Saturn V. Saturn V was a 3,000-ton machine, and that's with an energy enough to more than that to lift you off the pad. It's an environment that's interesting. Very shaky ride in the early part of the launch through the first stage. The second and third stages are just as smooth as the first stage is shaky.
In terms of layman meets Neil Armstrong, which is this moment for me, what happens give me an idea of what happens on sleep patterns. Is there such a thing?
Sleeping?
Sleeping?
Yes. We had a question in our own mind. We have this complicated spacecraft to operate. Are we going to have somebody awake all the time to run all the switches? What we would like to have done is sleep simultaneously and just put the craft on autopilot, and that would be most efficient, we thought. And the problem is that if we all went to sleep and then the spacecraft drifted off attitude somehow and lost antenna lock with Earth, they wouldn't be able to communicate to us that we had a problem if anyone came up. So we said, how can we solve that problem? We talked about the concept with the computer guys and the simulator guys, and they thought maybe we could spin stabilize the craft like a rifle bullet, and it would stay on path, and we'd have the antenna pointed right back down toward Earth. And the question was, well, would it last us 8 hours while we were sleeping? Could it be done? They duplicated in the simulator and determined that in fact you could spin stabilize it for 8 hours, and you wouldn't have to spin it very fast. Very, very slowly would be enough to keep it on attitude, and we could keep emergency contact with Earth, and it worked. So that's what we did. We slept simultaneously, and then we could operate full efficiency for the other 2/3 of the day.
And in terms of the camaraderie that you build on a mission like that, not just that you're on a mission to the moon, but the nature of it, you're all still alive and well, and that's fantastic. There must be something about lunar travel that's good for longevity, I'm thinking.
Well, I hope that's true. We were a congenial bunch, but really focused on the job. We really could not afford the luxury of diverting our attention away from our primary responsibilities, because problems usually occur when you least expect them.
Yes.
And you can't get complacent. You have to keep paying attention, and we were very determined to keep paying attention.
Yeah. So Neil, it's coming time to land, and as that process begins, you've got a computer malfunction telling you there's something wrong. What's the process you followed at that point?
Yes, the lunar descent from lunar orbit down to the surface is a very complex part of the overall flight, with a lot of things happening simultaneously and not a lot of time to consider abnormalities when they arise. In the middle of the descent, our computer did complain at us that it was having a problem, but it didn't admit responsibility.
Sounds like a modern computer.
I have to admit, I didn't understand the nature of this particular alarm. The computer had a lot of kind of complaints, but I didn't know them all. This one was unusual, and we asked Mission Control on Earth to help us solve the problem, and they didn't take very long to say, you're cleared to continue. That it was an overload problem in the computer, but the central part of the computer that was doing our calculations of our position and our navigation was working properly, and that was good news. So we continued on toward the landing site, but then the computer showed us where it intended to land, and it was a very bad location. It was on the side of a large crater, about I suppose 100 or 150 meters in diameter, and with very steep slopes covered with very large boulders. Not a good place to land at all. So I took over manually and flew it like a helicopter out to the west direction. We got into a smoother area with not so many rocks, found a level area, and was able to get it down there safely before we ran out of fuel.
Yeah, within what, 20 seconds? Or
something like 20 seconds of fuel left.
It's almost like you were planning to prepare a movie here, because everything was just on the edge of everything. Yeah. So the craft's landed. Is there a moment where the three of you, at least momentarily, acknowledge that moment? Is that...
Indeed. We took it was a handshake.
You really went to town, didn't you?
Congratulations, we made it this far.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of work to do at that point, and we couldn't luxuriate in those feelings.
And including getting home.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at the moment, we didn't. We concerned that because the lunar surface is so warm, it's over the boiling point of water, and substantially. And so the heat of the surface could affect fluids in the systems of the lunar module adversely. We had to be very cognizant of potential thermal problems that might be in existence, and if it was going to get worse, we were going to have to take off immediately and get out of there. But that worked out pretty well. There were these concerns, but they seemed to be working out satisfactorily, so we agreed that we could stay on the surface a bit longer, but we were going to keep an eye on it for the first several hours.
And your words, people have professed as to why those words and whatever else. So were you, as you were coming closer into land, were they coming to mind?
Oh no, I didn't think about that until after landing. I had no confidence in our ability to get down safely, so I didn't bother thinking about that until after landing. And of course, the first statement we made was the Eagle has landed. Yes. Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed, and that was the signature line for achieving the presidential goal that we had been working for a decade on, and in our view, that was a very important statement. And getting down on that was less important in our view, but it was significant. We actually touch your boot into the sand and recognize that it's okay to stand there.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
So you now then went and did the famous walk to plant the flag, but also to respect those that had been before and attempting to reach the moon and had been involved in the process. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we recognize that we wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been for our competitors in the Soviet Union. It was actually the competition that made both of our programs able to do the things that they achieved. And so we recognize that by putting some medallions for our fallen comrades on both sides who had not lived to see the event, and that was a tender moment.
I was going to say, there must be such an emotional moment, because even in the time I've known you, Neil, as much as that was competitive, there's such an element of decency in you as a person, and to actually be on the moon and to say, but by the grace of God, I'm the one who did it. Mm-hmm. And you know, that moment where you probably wanted a little privacy, but other than the 400 plus million that were watching, you had that moment. It must be something that you have reflected on over the years.
It was special and memorable, but it was only instantaneous because there was work to do.
Yeah. And
the checklists were all over us. We needed to get on with things, and that's why we were there. We were there to meditate. We were there to get things done. Sure. And so we got on with it.
Yeah. And so you went back to the craft, and it's then that I think you heard that there was a phone call for you.
Mm-hmm.
I am surprised.
They didn't say phone call. They said there's something special here.
Okay.
Yeah. I forget what.
Trying to modernise the story, but I'm wrong on that. So you've come back, and it's known to you that there's someone to speak to. Yeah. And you didn't say, look, I'm busy at the moment. You did take the call.
I did take the call.
And who was that?
And it was the President of the United States who was speaking from his office in the White House. And a very nice congratulatory message from the President on behalf of everyone who had worked on the project. And that was a surprise, a very pleasant surprise, and again, there was work to be done, so get back to job.
Right. And so to the liftoff to return, an issue with the ignition that required some rudimentary innovation.
Yeah, when you're in the spacesuit and it's pressurized, it's very cumbersome. You're like the Frankenstein monster, and you have this big backpack back, and if you turn, that backpack is swinging around, and my colleague in one of these motions banged into the circuit breaker panel with his backpack, and there's a lot of circuit breakers over there, lots of ones, and so he could have picked something that was not very important, but he banged into the circuit breaker that controlled the SN engine that got us back into orbit. I think that when we recognized that, we thought it probably will hold, but maybe we better see if there's a way to increase our chances of making sure the circuit breaker wouldn't automatically disengage. So we took a piece of a plastic pen, magic marker kind of pen, and made a little crutch to hold it in place.
I think if they'd asked any of the 400 plus million that were watching that they're just about to insert part of a pen to ensure they get home, they wouldn't have believed it. They wouldn't have believed it.
Well, I really think that had we not done that, we'd still been all right. But it was just insurance. It's nice to get a little insurance now. Yeah.
On landing, of course, there was celebration that, to a great extent, I don't think's ever stopped. And ever since that time, there have been people who have claimed that never happened. And imagine that, after all of the effort and all the passion, that there are still people that would say that. What was your initial response to that when I talked to you? You said something fascinating about the number of people that were involved in that project.
Well, I don't recall what I said, but people love conspiracy theories. I mean, they are very attractive. But it was never a concern to me because I know that one day somebody's going to go fly back up there and pick up that camera I left. And so that'll be sure that...
Well, look, I recall, and I think it was a fantastic response, and that was, because I'm hanging off every word you say, Neely, see, I remember, and it was around about the fact that 800,000 staff at NASA couldn't possibly keep a secret.
That's right.
And knowing how people work, I think that's so compelling, I can't tell you. But in that conversation as well, you alerted me to the fact that someone has put together the most marvellous combination of your landing against Google Moon mapping, which side by side clearly endorses not only that, but every crater, the flag. There's been no property development. We've just decided when we looked at the footage.
It's opportunity.
So let's just have a quick look at it.
This slide shows the trajectory to the surface. The actual powered descent of the lunar module to the surface took 12 minutes and 32 seconds. And this is just the final 3 minutes, the part that's really interesting as you get close to the surface of the moon. Now, in the left screen, you will see the original 1969 movie film that we took from the window of the lunar module Eagle. And on the right side, you will see what the crew saw looking out the window in front of them. Now, there is a shaded area there that shows you the exact duplicate of the area that's on the left, so you can compare the craters and see if they are duplicate of each other. The one on the left took place 42 years ago. This picture's on the right took place in the last 2 years. Okay, we've been descending. I should tell you, you'll hear the crewmen talking. They're my co-pilot giving altitude and descent rates, and you'll hear people in the background talking from mission control on Earth. We've been descending about 2,000 meters a minute. We're now down to about below 1,000 meters in altitude. My computer tells me that it's taking us to a landing just on the right side of that big crater up in the left-hand corner. The slopes are steep and the rocks look very large, the size of automobiles. Certainly not a place that I want to land. So I took over manually from the computer, the autopilot, and flew it like a helicopter on out to the west to try to find a smoother, more level landing spot. The computer is complaining now and then. You'll hear caution alarms, 1202s and 1201s, which is telling us the computer is a little bit concerned about its operation, but everything looks good, and the people in mission control tell us we can continue. Okay, we're about 100 meters above the soil, looking down at this 30-meter crater, about 8 meters deep. Looks like a real geological treasure. I want to go back there and look at that if I ever get the chance while I'm on foot. We're looking for a smooth spot beyond that crater. I see a smooth spot right up near the top of the screen. It looks like that's a good place to be, and I'm running low on fuel. I have less than 2 minutes of fuel.
Good. It's 20 feet.
Getting down below about 70 meters now.
Down, high forward.
50 meters, still looking good.
75.
In the left side, you will see in the old movie that the rocket engine is starting to kick up some dust off the surface.
Ice on. Down to
Get a 30-second fuel warning. Need to get it down on the ground here pretty soon before we run out. Okay. The picture on the left is more accurate, but there's more dust. There you see the shadow of my landing leg coming on the surface on the blowing dust.
Just into the right level.
We're very close to the surface right now.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Neil, that's amazing, and to have you actually commentate through it in a relaxed state, far more relaxed than you would have been 42 years ago, is just very, very special.
Recognizing the head start obtained by the Soviets with their large rocket engines, which gives them many months of lead time, and recognizing the likelihood that they will exploit this lead for some time to come in still more impressive successes, we nevertheless are required to make new efforts on our own. For while we cannot guarantee that we shall one day be first, we can guarantee that any failure to make this effort will make us last. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the
We're
Earth.
approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Great. Coming up 9 minutes. We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Altitude 4,200.
Houston, you're a go for landing. Over.
Contact light. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But did the American Eagle really fly that far? Or perhaps it was pushed, or chased by a Russian bear? Was the threat of the Russians making yet another space first enough to force the Americans into the most amazing hoax of all time?
We shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.